Okay. We're good to go. Right. Maybe have a roll call, please.
Chair Washer.
Excused.
Chair Washer is excused. Vice Chair Hahn.
Here.
Vice Chair Hahn is present. Commissioner Carpenter.
Present.
Commissioner Carpenter is present. Commissioner Collins. Present. Commissioner Collins is present. Commissioner Dunn.
Present.
Commissioner Dunn is present. Commissioner Thompson.
Present.
Commissioner Thompson is present. Commissioner Mayo.
Present.
Commissioner Mayo is present. Commissioner Jordan.
Excused.
Commissioner Jordan is excused. Commissioner Carter.
Excused as well.
Commissioner Carter is excused.
Okay, one thing I forgot to mention, I want to before we vote on the meeting and that's for previous meeting is that if anyone who was wishing to speak today is not already signed up, please do so by visiting the table in the back of the room. Thank you. Okay, and we do have a quorum present, so all members are present here tonight will be voting. And next on the agenda is consideration of minutes or preceding motion. The motion, please.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the minutes of the previous meeting.
We have a second.
Second.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and call roll. Have that be a roll call vote. All right.
Vice Chair Hahn.
Yes.
Vice Chair Hahn is in favor. Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter is in favor. Commissioner Collins. Yes. Commissioner Collins is in favor. Commissioner Dunn.
Yes.
Commissioner Dunn is in favor. Commissioner Thompson.
Yes.
Commissioner Thompson is in favor. Commissioner Mayo.
Yes.
Commissioner Mayo is in favor. Votes needed.
And we'll have unanimously. We did not receive any votes on the contract, but that's still running.
Correct, no voicemails on the CPP live meeting. However, all of the email scores, if it's either with the original packet or with the new with the packet, it's all.
Okay, thank you, Jim. And then more time to those who wish to give comments, you send it in advance, put it on my guidelines, so we don't have them signed up online. Okay, so just keep it there, the road goes like that, to be allowed to speak for the Senate. Okay, first item on the agenda is create a public hearing action on the request variance for accessory building size increase for 7261 Mark Court in the farm subdivision land unit development. Mr. Irvin.
Thank you, Dave, and Mr. Chairman, and members of the Planning Commission. My name is David Miller, and the Senior Manager of the City's Planning Division. It is my pleasure to be presenting to you this evening. Next slide, please. You appear to have a small delay, please bear with us. We can go ahead and advance to slide number 2 if available.
Because all my defaults are good. So we vote on those two.
Are all these, the computer that helps me broadcast into the video has decided to not go longer. So I don't think it will obviously is really diligent to resolve this. So we apologize for the delay here.
I ran the other day. Flooded water world, overflowed all the tunnels and stuff. We're 2 miles away. The lake that just released water, we got a sprinkle.
Kid, you met and it missed you. The water world in Denver.
The water world and water world's got one top.
Would you want to consider a recess until these second rule?
I think we probably should.
Recess for an extra 10 minutes.
Yeah, let's go ahead and go recess for 10 minutes. So we will be back to receive at 7:20 p.m. And the computer will be. No.
Yours just has a different.
Yeah.
How? You don't have presentations.
Didn't they come on this?
Show
this
how.
come on that one? They told me they have on this. This one's different.
It started once, like 2 weeks. That's 3.
Oh.
Up on that screen. This is online.
Oh, this is outside, this is from the.
Yep.
Oh, I see.
It's like that.
Oh.
If you watch them both during the meeting, you'll see this one. A few seconds.
What do we do with that? Trying to do it.
Yes.
So should be what's. So the fact that there's
Yeah. It's like,
I'm guessing there's this experience every time I call. Yeah. Did you really?
Did you check the plug?
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of a meeting today in my car. Right in the middle of the whole
Oh.
So after is, the after, for those of you that maybe, voting and representing, you know, the representatives to the next slide. So just looking at the screen, guys, and then we're going to say, the next slide, please. Make sure it's all clear, so I get the audio as well. You might go up, and that'll give you courage to go to the next slide, or you can back up, you can just say, back up 2 slides or whatever. Okay. Regional Council, whenever you'd like to call it that order.
I'm sorry?
So there's no one there.
There's no one there.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. One of our absents.
Okay, well, we all appear to be back in the seats, so let's go ahead and call the meeting back over. Mr. Sherman?
Thank you for your patience, everybody. We'll have a little bit long. Kenneth and Mary Costa, own a single family detached home located at 7261 Warren Court, subdivision. The proposed wish to build a 1,000 square foot accessory building to serve as an ancillary garage and rear yard for the property. By section 114610 for the Westminster Municipal Code, the proposal is completed the maximum of 786 property to allocate units of the building. Tonight, the proposal is seeking your approval for the 274 square foot variance. Allow construction of the 1,000 square foot. The required meaning is not to be formed, is after an opportunity, and that total hearing will be properly noticed, including mailings, board, adjacent property owners. The agenda memo is associated with attachments to the next PowerPoint presentation, and both notices mailed, listed in the village to Westminster Village, are hereby permitted to take the public record at this time. Next slide, please.
Don't bloody do this.
Here is a map of the area with the proposed property outlined here. The petition has expressed a desire for a 25 by 40, 1,000 square foot building to be positioned on the existing concrete pad located in the area that would be attached on the picture. It is indicated that the use of the building is garage, which is being stored cars. It is also indicated that the size and position of the proposed building would also be set in sound impacts. This is proposed property for the generating of West 72nd Avenue, which is immediately adjacent to the property to the south. The property is surrounded with single-family detached residential, single-family detached residential homes. West 72nd Avenue marks the boundary between the city of Westminster and the city of Arlington in this area. Next slide, please. Here, you can see the definition of accessory building that's found in section 1121 of the Westminster Municipal Code. The key parts of this definition are structure is not visible, meaning that it cannot be used as a bar. And then it is clearly examined the municipal structure of the property, which in this instance is the house. Garage is all out as an example of a common accessory building. Next slide, please. Section 114610 of the Westminster Municipal Code provides the size for accessory buildings. A residential applicant is allowed an accessory building area that is limited to 5% of the total property area, or 600 square feet with a chamber space. With the 11th largest lot in the farming subdivision, the closest square foot in the house of 726 square feet, which is 5% of the total lot size, 14,525 square feet. Building a 1,000 square foot accessory building would require the granting of a variance of 274 square feet with a published standard. Well, now providing with the building, it's half the house on the specific area. These can turn out the weather variance may be granted. Next slide, please. Section 228 of the Westminster Municipal Code contains 6 criteria for evaluating various requests. But the planning commission must find but also is the criteria nothing says outside. Or variances are granted. The applicant has provided justifications for the criteria, which are to be analyzed in detail in the area of the known. The six criteria may also be used as a still known. It has been provided this evening as available at the back of the room. With respect to the special material, staff agrees to the application with the result of actual difficulties in the process, which is easy to run on so the supports value of restored costs. The additional space would be on sufficient basis with more to work around and under conditions and shelter environment. Staff does not believe the situation arises as well as the constituents of the commercial however, the specific application of the provides for very large 126 RD, which has provided ample space for storage of vehicles and tools. Next slide, please. Moving on to the second, third, and fourth criteria, staff does not find that there are any physical circumstances or conditions such as irregularity, narrowness, or shallowness of the lot, or exceptional topographical or physical conditions to the utility of the property. Staff agrees that circumstances and conditions exist for the proposals that do not affect the entirety of the farm subdivision. There are 30 other lots within the farm subdivision that are adjacent to the 72nd Avenue right-of-way. For all the circumstances found in 77 Avenue notices and site issues, only affect approximately 17% of the subdivision affects the lot. Staff finds that the property is reasonably developed and conforming to the sales for. And so the conditions and circumstances do not exist as a precursor to property. Due to the lot's larger shape, size, and other characteristics, the larger normal accessory location of the property, which is an advantage rather than a detriment. Next slide, please. Looking at the financial criteria, staff agrees that any such conditions or circumstances may exist, but are not resolved with physical private action on the part of the party. Staff agrees, however, that the variance standard will always be essential character of the farm subdivision and will potentially impair the appropriate use for development of adjacent properties. There are no other variances to represent accessory buildings in the subdivision. This variance is granted with regard to the homes, larger accessory buildings that are allowed to build. Or because this property requires that an additional 274 square feet be represented by any building that would be needed to say otherwise, it's not true. Oversized buildings may have additional needed to produce energy for their properties. Next slide, please. Staff recommends holding the seating table so that the planning commission may deliberate on the preliminary decision related to the requested variance. Staff recommends the planning commission denies the requested variance so that the accessory buildings are used to sales. To allow for a 1,000 square feet of building, 7261 or in the farm subdivision, that this application has been successful at 306, the regulated without section 228E, in other words, the 2 years to go. Next slide, please. Should the planning commission elect to approve the variance request, staff would recommend the additional structure be attached to the approval to ensure the least amount of impacts are the two properties. Housing is participating and also taking share. Thank you for your attention and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Chairman, I'll go ahead and the applicant part of the presentation, questions to that.
There's a few of these events to provide for the applicant's presentation. Thank you. Thank you.
Is this working okay?
One more slide, please.
There we go.
Well, as you all know, my name is Ken. I'm trying to get this 724 square feet. That's right there. My existing 5% of the property value or property size. The whole thing of this garage to me is a lifetime goal. I've worked, all my life trying to get a place where I can work and retire and build cars and woodwork and other things. So I wanted to show the planning committee, what I've used the building for and where it was actually placed on the property. You notice on the very first slide, it shows the footprint of the map on that very first slide, and it wasn't correctly set on that slide. It appears way bigger in that first slide than it really is. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. So I'm going to go on the presentation. So if you want to change to the next slide, that would be great. So, like Dave's presentation said, I'm looking for a shelter garage to put, all my tools and a vehicle to live in there. And as a benefit, I was hoping to get this building up to try and drive down some of that noise from 72nd. I don't know if any of you have lived on 72nd or been around 72nd, but in the evenings, especially on Fridays and Saturday nights, there's drag racing. I mean, it's very loud. And I noticed there's some other neighbors here that would probably say the same thing. It's kind of crazy, but that's the added benefit. I'm looking for the room, for retirement and to work. I've been a resident of Westminster for over 40 years and spent all my time here. So that's the main reason I want to get a garage that I can really work in. If you could go to the next slide, please. These are the things that I'll be storing, toolboxes, workbench, cabinets, welders, air compressors. That's more for the automotive side of the house. Then there's the woodworking, dust vacuums, radial arm saws, table saws, bench sanders. That all takes room. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to show the existing 5%. Is where the red outline is, and with all the peripherals that are in there, including a lift and a vehicle. It doesn't leave a lot of room, and it's really kind of an unsafe work area. So the blue part of that on the slide is the variance. That's how much difference that makes on that 274 feet. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to show the type of lift that I want to put in this structure. These are pretty common lifts that you see in dealerships and automotive repair. And that's something I'm very familiar with. I've been in the automotive industry for over 40 years and used these many times, but I just wanted to show you what I wanted in there. Next slide, please. So the next thing that I looked at was I went into Google Maps and I started looking around the neighborhood. And I started seeing several buildings that are over the 5% of their lot sizes. So what I did for this presentation is we took snapshots of them. There's 2 slides for every one, and I wanted to show you guys the outline of the measurement so you could see there was a fairly true measurement. There wasn't something that was made up. Next slide, please. So this was one, it's 7261 Eagles. Their lot size is pretty close to the 28206. Their building size is 1995, and they're at 7%. So they're 2%. Next slide, please. So this actually shows it. And this particular gentleman just popped the top of his building is actually home, which I know doesn't really have a lot to do with my garage, but he's probably added, I don't know how many thousand more square feet to his home. Plus he has that, that huge garage system. Next slide.
So there's all the measuring points on that, so you can see what we measured. Next slide. Okay, this is 76th and Chase. Little different lot, but still bigger than the normal size. This one was 12,054. The building size was 715, and it came out to be 5.9%. So again, it's over the 5%. Next slide. And here it shows the measurements, the property. Next slide. Next slide. Again, here's another one. This one's right off of 80th and Marshall. He measured out to be 15,582. Building size was 1216, and here again he was 7%. Next slide. Again, these are just measurement points just to show you the properties. Next slide. Next slide. Here's another one, 76 at Ingalls. Lot size was 10,007. Building size was 847, which put this one at 8.4%. And here again, I'm just asking for 1.8 over. Next slide. Here again, just pictures for your edification. Next slide. Next slide. And here's the biggest one I could find. I had to look for a big one. This is still in Westminster. It's the next subdivision over. This one was 7,520 square feet. Building size was 924, and he came in at 12%. So somehow these people are getting them. I don't know how they're getting them, but that's the point I wanted to get across. So next slide. Again, next slide. One more time, next slide. And here's my property, and this is a little more closer to than that first shot, because on my building, that's pretty close to where it is. There's a 9-foot distance between the property line and the back of the building, and so it's not quite as big as it appears on that first shot. So here again, it's only 274 square feet is all I'm asking for, which would make a world of difference in my, in what I'm trying to do with it. So next slide. As far as the sound quality, I know that argument is probably a little strange when you're trying to put in a building to deal with sound. But I just walked across the street and I was leaning up against a 12-foot high sound wall that's on the other side of the street. And what happens is the cars go by there and that sound rolls off, and it's taller than our side by almost 4 feet. So it rolls over pretty frequently. So it is pretty noisy. And then, you take the Saturday night and Friday night traffic with the racing and all that. It gets pretty crazy. So next slide, please. That's basically my presentation. I wanted to thank all of you for letting me come up here. And I hope that you'll grant me that 724 square feet, if you could see your way to do that. But that's the end of my presentation.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate your time. We have any questions for staff or the applicant? Commissioner Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question for the applicant.
Sure.
I just wanted you to say a little bit more about the physical circumstance that you mentioned about only the areas and you're not able to build on your existing garage. Can you say a little more about that? And
Yes,
how that
sure.
is?
Absolutely. The existing garage is, the bedrooms are over the garage, so there's no way to put a lift in there, and there's not enough room to go to the side, because I'd encroach on the next door neighbor's property line. So there's no way to add there, so it has to be a separate building.
And secondly, this is my last one for now. you're not encroaching on any setbacks or anything with this variance request?
No, as a matter of fact, we moved it during this process. This process has taken over 2 years to get this far. And over this process, we've moved the building away from the property lines even a little further just to be sure. And, you know, if by some unfortunate circumstance I have to build the smaller one, the only thing it would do would be to add to the length of the building, nothing to the width. So the neighbors that are behind me would still see what they saw. You know, they wouldn't be able to see anything. That's the reason I put that last picture with the traffic in there, just so you could see that's the side that it would impact. But they have a 12-foot wall coming out of their front door anyway, so they can't even see over the wall. So it wouldn't really impact them from their living rooms. You know, they would obviously see a little bit of it if they were driving by, but nothing would really impact their homes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Tomczyk?
I've got a question, thank you. Question for the applicant. What precludes you from building on the backside of your garage to the west?
So, well, there's a family room there, the way the house is designed. Yeah, the rest of the house is behind that.
So the garage just doesn't end at the.
It doesn't end there, yeah.
Okay. And then a question for staff. Where does the 5% originate from?
That's a code element. It's found in 146N under the size. There's it's number 4.
That part I understand. Why did the city pick 5% instead of 3.5 or 7 or some other number?
They do not know the history of why 5% was chosen. I know that in about 2013-ish, maybe 2012, there was a very extensive work done on accessory buildings, and that's when they arrived at the current standard that you see, which is 2 buildings in terms of quantity, 3 if there's no garage, and then one of the buildings would be a garage. And they're talking about the garage and you go to the house, so that's quantity. And then size is arrived at 600 square feet total, or 5% of the property, whichever was greater, with a maximum of 2,000 square feet for a very large property.
Okay. And given those parameters, does the applicant's property count as a very large property?
It's the 11th largest in the farm subdivision. We do have larger properties in the city. There are some that, we're literally limited at the 2,000.
And that's sort of my question with a vague sort of threshold of what a very large property looks like. Could the applicant have one garage at 726 square feet, another one at 324? They back right up next to one another and it gets us 1,000 square feet.
Well, the way the code section is worded, those numbers are the total. So if you had the 3 accessory structures, a garage, and 2 others, then those 3 buildings together would equal, in this case, 726 square feet, or variance granted 1,000 square feet.
Okay.
So Mr. Costa has intimated that he will be removing an existing shed so that he can get all of his space into the garage as an example.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understood. Thank you.
The only other thing I wanted to get entered in the record is there is no HOA there. I didn't know if I'd said that before. There's not an HOA. If that helps.
Understood.
So I have a question for you, Mr. Cozy. Did I see on the overhead slide you're showing the location of the garage, and there was the shed was on the towards the north, correct?
Yes.
Did it say on that slide that you were going to keep that shed, or the shed is coming down?
Originally we were going to try to keep it, but as the process grew, we decided to get rid of it.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. So no other questions from planning commission for staff at this point in time? Okay, I want to open up the public testimony by stating public testimony has been received in the form of emails and or voicemails, which we don't have any of. They will be played during this live meeting and entered into the permanent record. Also want to let people know that those who wish to give comments and signed up in advance will be called upon in order to speak during this live meeting. So I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing.
So I don't have anybody on the sign up sheet. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to come up?
I sent an email.
Okay, that's been included. It is in the public record.
Okay.
Mr. Palmer? Come on up, sir.
I just want you folks to look at, and let's compare apples to apples, not apples to oranges that he's comparing to.
I'm sorry, John. Do you mind saying your name? And
John Palmer,
thank you.
Westminster resident. Some of these addresses that he's giving you aren't even in close proximity to his neighborhood. 80th, 76th. Sounds to me like we're trying to run a business out of this building. Personally, I mean, he's already got a 2-car attached garage that's, I don't know how many square feet, and now he's asking for 1,000 on top of that. You know, he's talking about the sizes of these other buildings. When did they come into play? Was it prior to the city's realignment of the code? Okay, were there building permits issued for those buildings, and if so, when? I mean, maybe that's something we need to look at, like I said, so that we're actually comparing apples to apples. Because this is not with the addresses and locations he's giving me. Doesn't have any stated bill date or any building permit information for you as far as when it was approved, or if these people just built them without approval. That's all I have to say.
Can I answer some of that?
Thank you, Mr. Palmer.
Can he answer?
We can go ahead and answer this time. Normally, we would wait until the end and then have a rebuttal, but since we have a small audience, go ahead and answer, please.
Well, two of the properties, I can see from my backyard. One of them is over my back fence, and the other one is the next cul-de-sac over. And so the assertion that they're not in the neighborhood is incorrect. And I'm also looking, the variance is 724 square feet. It's not 1,000, like you stated. So, either way, if I don't get granted, I'm going to put the 726 square foot up anyway. It's just that, it's not a business. This is for my retirement. This is for my pleasure. I've worked for a long time to try and get this, and it's been a dream of mine, and that's what I'm trying to get. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from planning commission?
You close the public hearing
No, we have not. We're still public
now? That
hearing.
was my question.
Okay, no. I do have one more question for the applicant. So 724 versus 1,000 feet. One of the criteria that's of the 6 is repeated in almost each of them is hardship or some type of inconvenience. Or so what does the difference in that square footage mean as far as what you want to do out of that?
So the hardship comes in where when you were building a vehicle or restoring it, it's on the lid for a very long time, so that space is used. So that's a big hardship. The reason I want it is to be able to, restore cars. I have a 61 Ford truck that my father gave me, and I still own it today, and I want to restore it. And it's 20 feet long, so it takes up a big chunk of that building. So that additional square footage, it just means everything for us, as far as that goes. So that's what I need. It's working room. It's not having to try and work around stuff. It's trying to do things the right way.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Kerman.
Mr. German?
Yeah, just something to help out, sir. Just to be clear, the amount stays to Mr. Kokoska without any action on your part, the 726 square feet. What they're requesting is a variance of 274 to bring the total up to 1,000.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, then, since we we're going to have any other public testimony, I want to go ahead and close the public portion of this meeting. And we have already given the applicant a chance at rebuttal. Is there anything else you would like to add at this time? No? Mr. German, anything from staff?
No, sir, but we can, of course, answer any questions.
Okay, then, don't see anyone that has any questions. I go ahead, and I guess we can go ahead and make a motion on this. I'm sorry, Dave, I was looking the wrong way.
That's
please.
okay. That's okay. You get to choose when you call on people. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the planning commission approve the 274 square foot accessory building size increase variance to allow for a 1,000 square foot accessory building at 7261 Lamar Court in the Farm subdivision based on the following code analysis in section 2-2-8B. Number one, hardship, both with the lift space that he can't expand his current garage on there, as well as the sound from 72nd and everything else. For number two, the unique physical circumstances. It's a corner cul-de-sac, so therefore the lot lines are irregular. It is a unique lot. It is not a rectangular lot that continues on. The unusual circumstances as well. It is, again, it's a cul-de-sac. It's also a double frontage lot because it backs up on 72nd there. For the physical circumstances, again, the hardship, the fact that he can't expand his garage, and those are the ones for number four. Number five, special conditions. The applicant didn't cause this. He didn't plat the subdivision. He didn't write the city code that was there, so we can't. So nothing done by the applicant there. And number six, I disagree that it's going to alter the essential character of the neighborhood. There are other buildings similar size. It's not going to change the essential character of the neighborhood. We're not tearing down the house and building apartments there or anything. So anyhow, that's my motion. I apologize for making it verbose, but anyhow, that's where I sit.
Do we have a second on this motion?
I'll second it, and also state that I agree with a lot of what Commissioner Carpenter is saying. I will sort of couch that a little bit, that I believe that the hardship is, in fact, as Dave is saying, relative to the lot lines and the ability to build anything on here. The actual use and interior and things of that nature is a hardship to what the applicant would like to do. Might not seem like much of a hardship to the rest of the public. So in future, we would have to be careful of what we consider a hardship.
Yes, Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question real quick for Dave. Can I ask a question in the middle of this motion? I thought I read somewhere that the siding was vertical and that there was a comment about changing it to be horizontal to match the housing if something was approved. Is that still intact?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I make sure?
That has been very willing to work with us and with this company that's building we would be building garage to try and arrive at siding it as far as almost possible.
So that would be a condition or something that,
It's actually listed as one of the conditions I've provided in the staff report, if you wish to approve, we recommend, which is basically that he meets, I should say, that the applicant meets all of the other requirements, which would, that's what the siding requirement would.
so that was the siding and the taking down the other accessory structure.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think there was two others. Okay, thank you. Answered my
Those are
question.
all the requirements.
Thank
So essentially what we're saying with those additional conditions is that he's meeting all the requirements of the code, with the only exception being the increased size of the equipment.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I think what I want to do at this point in time is we did have at the end of this agenda some recommendations for approval. So I'd like to get those read out loud just so we're all understand what staff is, if we did approve this, the things that they would like to have added to as conditions of approval. And if I'm not mistaken, we may have to add those into the motion. We would, okay, here's what I think we need to do. We would need to vote down the first motion and then make us, no? Okay,
No, the first motion's okay.
You could friendly amend it.
friendly amendment? Okay, all right, all right. Okay, all right, thanks. Okay, first we had the accessory building must be entirely in conformance with all applicable building codes and with all requirements of Westminster Municipal Code, Section 11-4-6N, excepting the allowance for the larger size. Only one accessory building may exist on the property. Once the new garage is constructed, any other existing accessory buildings must be properly removed within 30 days of final inspection of the garage. Number 3, the accessory building may be up to 1,000 square feet in size and may not be expanded beyond this limit with either enclosed or unenclosed space, such as adding a carport, for example. And number 4, the accessory building may not be used to house any business or home occupation as defined and regulated in the Westminster Municipal Code Sections 11-2-1 and 11-4-10. So, Mr. Carpenter, you made the original motion. Are those changes acceptable to you?
They are. I'm not sure I get why we're limiting any sort of business there, but in the future, but I guess they can. I know we don't want an automobile shop in the backyard, but I'm just thinking in the future we're limiting that. But that's okay. I accept. Sorry for being verbose again.
Mr. Tomachek.
I also accept.
Okay, call a vote, please.
Vice Chairman Connell.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Connell is in favor. Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter is in favor. Commissioner Coleman.
Yes.
Commissioner Coleman is in favor. Commissioner Dunn.
Yes.
Commissioner Dunn is in favor. Commissioner Tomachek.
Yes.
Commissioner Tomachek is in favor. Commissioner Mayo.
Yes.
Commissioner Mayo is in favor. Vote is complete.
And the motion passes unanimously. Thanks, sir. Appreciate your coming.
Thank you.
Good luck with that truck.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay. Next and last on the agenda is item 3B, public hearing and action on a 5 feet 2 and 15/16 residential rear setback variance for 1101 Mead Court in the Legacy Ridge Filing 9 official development plan, a planned unit development. Mr. Caldwell, you ready to roll?
Not quite.
it looks like the slides are up. And I have to Caldwell, senior planner with the city's planning division, and this is a variance for the Chapel residence at 1101 East Court in the Legacy Ridge 9, official development plan for a deck encroachment into a 15-foot rear setback. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry.
Go back.
Please, can you go back one slide? Thank you. I'm having a difficult vision issue here, so I'll do my best. As a part of bringing this project before you, a staff agenda memo has been created, and tonight's public hearing has been properly noticed. The agenda memo, its associated attachments, tonight's PowerPoint presentation, and the public notices mailed, posted, and published in Westminster window are hereby entered into the public record. The notices met the timing required for mailing, posting, and publishing. The notices of the public hearing were mailed to 32 property owners and homeowners association within 300 feet of the dwelling under consideration tonight. The city has also posted the hearing date and time on its website. Next slide, please. This is the vicinity map. This is an aerial map of the proposed variance location. The dwelling at 11010 Mead Court is in the Legacy Ridge 9 official development plan. This is a gated subdivision in the Legacy Ridge Golf Course community. The site is generally south of 112th Avenue and west of Federal Boulevard and west of Legacy Ridge Parkway. Next slide, please. A bit of background. The variance request application seeks a variance to Westminster Code Section 11-4-6D4 decks that states open, unenclosed, and uncovered decks or patios may extend into a required setback, provided they are constructed at ground level and do not conflict with any utility or other easements. The proposed deck at 11010 Mead Court is proposed to be constructed above an existing walkout basement level and will replace an existing smaller deck. The proposed deck will encroach 5 feet 2 and 16 inches into the existing 15-foot rear setback. This includes a 2 and 16-inch encroachment into the existing private utility easement that parallels the rear property line. Section 2-2-2E of the Westminster Municipal Code provides that the Planning Commission shall hear and decide variance requests. Section 2-2-8B of the Westminster Municipal Code specifies 6 criteria that are to be reviewed when considering a variance. The Planning Commission may only grant a variance if it finds that all 6 criteria are appropriately addressed and satisfied. Otherwise, the variance request must be denied. Section 2-2-8C-2-8C of the Westminster Municipal Code provides that decisions of the Planning Commission are final, subject only to an appeal to district court. Next slide, please. Slide 5. Yeah, there it is. First criteria is that the strict application of the provisions of Title 11 of this code would result in practical difficulties or unnecessary hardship that is inconsistent with the general purpose and intent of this code. Staff does not find that the strict application of the provisions of Title 11 of this code would result in practical difficulties or unnecessary hardship that is inconsistent with the general purpose and intent of this code. The applicant has not presented evidence in their application that the size of the existing deck has created a hardship that requires an expansion into the existing 15-foot rear setback. The existing deck appears to be about 240 square feet, and this is double the minimum standard in many other residential subdivisions in Westminster. The ODP, or Legacy Ridge Filing 9, does not list a minimum or maximum deck size or require a deck for any of the dwellings in the official development plan. The Legacy Ridge 9 official development plan is silent on deck requirements except to set a minimum setback for rear decks. The city has categorized housing types into 5 groups. For many types, there is not a minimum outdoor space required. For several housing types, there is a minimum outdoor space requirement at the side or rear of the dwelling. But this is only for a percentage of the dwellings. Next slide. This is slide 6. Criteria 2. If there are unique physical circumstances or conditions, such as irregularity, narrowness, or shallowness of the lot, or exceptional topographical or other physical conditions peculiar to the affected property. Staff does not find that there are unique physical circumstances or conditions such as irregularity, narrowness, or shallowness of the lot, or exceptional topographical or other physical conditions peculiar to the affected property. Criteria 3. These unusual circumstances or conditions do not exist throughout the neighborhood or district in which the property is located. Staff finds that these unusual circumstances or conditions do exist throughout the neighborhood or district in which the property is located. Many of the lots in the larger Legacy Ridge land unit development are shaped to allow the dwelling to take advantage of golf course access, or to allow dwellings to capture views of the golf course or the Rocky Mountains to the west, or to allow a potential walkout level basement. Legacy Ridge 9 is generally designed with similar intentions. Odd-shaped lots or long or narrow lots are not unusual in Legacy Ridge 9 and are designed with the intent as noted. This is Lot 4 and Block 1 of Legacy Ridge 9. Official development plan is reasonably shaped in the existing dwelling with the existing conforming deck or a reasonable fit for the lot. Special conditions and circumstances do not exist in the existing code and official development plan. Compliant dwelling and deck are testimony to the lack of special conditions and circumstances. Next slide, please. Slide 7. Criteria 4, that because of such physical circumstances or conditions, the property cannot be reasonably developed in conformity with the provisions of this code. Staff finds that the property has been reasonably developed in conformity with the provisions of this code. Staff finds that special physical conditions and circumstances do not exist for this lot. Criteria 5, that the special conditions and circumstances do not result from the present or prior actions of the applicant. Staff finds that special conditions and circumstances are not present for this lot. If they do exist, they are not the result of present or prior actions of the applicant. The applicant has noted that they recently purchased the dwelling in 2021. The existing dwelling and existing deck were in place at the time of their purchase. Their actions have not changed any conditions or circumstances that existed prior to their purchase. Slide number 8, please. Criteria number 6, that the variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or district in which the property is located, nor substantially or permanently impair the appropriate use or development of adjacent property. Staff finds that the variance, if granted, will alter the essential character of the neighborhood in which the property is located. The neighborhood in Legacy Ridge Filing 9 is identified in the Legacy Ridge Filing 9 official development plan as cluster single family. The residents refer to this group of 15 dwellings as the Hilltop neighborhood. There are no other variances for deck setbacks in the Hilltop neighborhood. The variance, if granted, would provide a precedent for other dwellings to encroach into the rear setback, and this may eventually alter the essential character of the Hilltop neighborhood. The intent of the cluster single-family area in the Legacy Ridge 5-9 official development plan is to create a pastoral setting with no fences on lot lines or on the private open space parcels. Proposed deck encroachment will intrude into the pastoral setting and permanently alter the essential character of this neighborhood. Slide number 9, staff recommendation. Staff recommends holding a public hearing to review the proposed variance. Staff recommendation is not supportive of this request for variance from the minimum 15-foot rear setback in the cluster single-family section of the Legacy Ridge 9 official development plan because the variance does not meet 5 of the 6 criteria required for a variance in section 2-2-8B of the Westminster Municipal Code. Staff did not find hardship, difficult lot configuration, unusual circumstances in the neighborhood, circumstances that prevent reasonable development of the lot, or no harm to the future neighborhood design. And next slide, please. Maybe slide number 10. Applicant is with us tonight, and they have a presentation to share with you as well. Eric Carlson with the law firm Foster, Graham, Milstein, and Kalisher is representing the applicants, Jack and Jennifer Schofel, owners of the dwelling at 11010 Mead Court, the subject of this hearing for variance. And I believe that Jennifer Schofel will introduce the slides. Thanks for your attention. There are several staff members here this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thanks.
Thank you, Patrick. We'll go ahead with the applicant presentation at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and the Commission. We appreciate the opportunity to present our project to you this evening. I'm Jennifer Schofel, and my husband and I own the home at 11010 Mead Court. I'm here tonight with my husband, Jack Schofel, and our attorney, Eric Carlson with Foster Graham, Milstein, Kalisher, and their architect, Mark Pedler, with F9 Productions. When we purchased our home in Hilltop last year, we knew the existing deck was small. It was in substantial disrepair and in desperate need of remodeling. What we didn't know at the time was that we would need a variance from the city to make the deck functional for our family. We want our deck to be more consistent with those of our neighbors. Most decks on the 15 homes in Hilltop have been expanded to make them more functional for the homeowners. We'd like to expand ours as well so that we also have a practical and useful space. Hilltop has an elected HOA comprised of its residents, an elected architectural review committee also comprised of its residents, and a longstanding and rigorous process for obtaining approval to implement a project like ours. We worked very closely with the Hilltop Architectural Review Committee to ensure our design is compatible within the neighborhood. We respectfully disagree with the small minority of neighbors who have characterized portions of our project as non-conforming. We followed Hilltop HOA's adopted process to its conclusion over a course of months, and sometimes in direct opposition to our own desires, but to ensure community conformity. And in November of 2021, the Architectural Review Committee gave us their unanimous support. Again, I'd like to thank you for your time tonight and introduce you to Eric Carlson, who will describe our request in detail. Thank you.
Good evening, Vice Chair, Commissioners. Eric Carlson, Foster Graham, Milstein, Kalisher. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. Thank you, Jennifer, and thanks to Patrick. You know, I know staff puts a lot of work into these applications all of the time, and we've worked together for several months now. And it's always, you know, he's done an incredible job. So I want you to hear that, and thanks to him. We recognize, you know, despite the fact that you had 2 on your agenda tonight, that variance applications aren't all that common in the city of Westminster. Our law firm does a lot of land use work all over the metro, and we know that variances are not typical here. And I think appreciate the work that you put into the first variance tonight, and I want to really make sure that we're explaining to you and showing you tonight how we do meet all of the approval criteria for this variance request in your application, and recognize that these variance requests they're not precedent setting. A variance request does not mean that if you approve one, you have to approve others in this neighborhood. This is a case-by-case evaluation of the circumstances of the Schaffels lot, of their property, as you apply those to the approval criteria in your code. And as Jennifer started with us on the introduction, this has already been approved by their homeowners association, which is a big deal in a community like this where you're only 15 homes. They put a lot of stake in their homeowners association and the architectural review committee that goes along with that. We all right? Yeah. And this is on the vicinity slide as Patrick identified here. This is the Legacy Ridge Golf Course community. It's a small segment of this. This is the Hilltop neighborhood. The picture on the top right there shows that this is a gated community that has only a total of 15 homes. As Jennifer explained, there's a homeowners association which is elected by the 15 property owners. They appoint an architectural review committee who approves all of the exterior modifications. So we know that we have architectural review committee support. That speaks large volumes to the character of the community, in understanding that this will not impair the use or development of adjacent properties. We also tonight in your packet have 7 letters of support from residents and neighbors. The Schaffels directly, the properties that directly abut this across the private streets to the rear and to the west and diagonal. We'll speak to those a little bit more as we go through the presentation. Next slide, please. The photos on this slide start to orient us to the Schaffels lot, their house, their property. The first picture that's on the left-hand side shows from the street facing east towards the Schaffel house. There's a big tree. This time of year, it's fully green with vegetation, and it essentially blocks the entire view of the deck. The same will be true if the expanded deck is approved. You will see that that's, speaks to a visual appeal of the deck or some aesthetic block in there. The second photo, which is the top right, shows a picture of the existing deck. As you can see, it's set in and recessed into the house. It's uncovered. What you can't quite see in the photo on the top right, but is actually incredibly important to this case, is the grass that you see between the street and the Schaffels house is not all their property. There is a strip of open space owned by the homeowners association there that actually creates a false sense of the size of their lot. This is really important for the physical circumstances of this lot because we're not asking for a variance that will be less than 15 feet from the street. We're asking for a variance that will be less than 15 feet from open space that is grassed yard that has all of the appearance and function of a continuation of their yard. So as that speaks to the way in which this impacts or doesn't impact the adjacent property owners, because we have an additional buffer of the private open space. This also shows that you have 3 street frontages. Another physical condition that is unique to the Schaffels house. So the only house in the Hilltop neighborhood that has 3 street frontages, which significantly impacts where you can build a house or where you can build an elevated deck. The bottom picture also shows as you enter the gate into the Hilltop neighborhood, the Schaffel house is directly in front of you. It's the first house and essentially the only house that you can see as you go in. This was important to the Architectural Review Committee. They said, we want to be careful about where we put this deck. We don't want to put it on the western side where there will be a big, large elevated deck that everybody sees as they enter the Hilltop community. They said, we prefer that it be in the rear. In fact, we require that it be in the rear, despite that there is a large side yard on the western side that was not acceptable to the homeowners association. Which, as you can see, is because, in part, that's the entrance to the Hilltop community. Next slide, please. As Jennifer explained, when they purchased this house, the deck was largely in disrepair. It's a west-facing deck in the Colorado elements. It's sun blistered, it gets snow, an incredible amount of heat. And this is the existing condition. This is, the deck is 229 square feet, which is very small for this neighborhood, right? I think that that's the important piece here is we're applying the approval criteria, the comparison, regardless of what other zone districts or other areas of the city may speak to deck size. The reality is that when these homes in the Hilltop community were constructed 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, the original builder made all very small decks in this 200 to 250 square foot deck. Since then, as you can see from Jim Vanderhoff's letter of support, as one of the neighbors who directly sees it, he says, everyone else has expanded their deck. The Schaffels have a small deck in the community. But it's our understanding as the Schaffels have talked with their neighbors that everyone else went through a process to expand their deck, to put covering on their deck, because they recognize that the way that these decks were built by the original builder were conducive to Colorado outdoor living. We know what it means to live in Colorado, right? We know what it means to live in Westminster. It's a beautiful view of Westminster. You look out, you can see the mountains, you can see the valley of Westminster, all of the beautiful open spaces in this city. But to not be able to use your deck because it's too small to fit a dining room table out there, to have your family around it, and it's blistering hot because it's not covered, make the practical difficulties and the unnecessary hardship for this deck. So as we see, if all of the other decks, we think 13 of the other decks have been expanded already in this neighborhood, none of which required variances because their lots didn't have the physical circumstances that the Schaffel lot has. These circumstances are unique to this property, and strict application of the code here creates an unnecessary hardship. Next slide, please. Here's the site plan, and this is where I had a laser. I wish I could laser up and show some things, but let me nerd out on a few measurements and a few lines here for just a second. I talked about the private open space that appears to be the Schaffels yard in the back of their house. You see it there, it's in hatch. There we go. If you look at the eastern side of the deck, either existing or proposed, the distance between the house and the street is over 23.5 feet. That means that there's over 7 feet of open space on the wide part of that pie. The variance request tonight is approximately 5 feet. Meaning, if that wasn't private open space, if that was in fact the Schaffels lot, as it would appear to anybody who drives through, a variance wouldn't be required for at least the eastern portion. Now the pie slivers over, there may be the need, if you're going to build a square deck, there would likely still be a need on the western side. So I don't want to mischaracterize that. But this really speaks to the 3 street frontages. Abutting open space that's owned by the homeowners association creates these unique physical circumstances of this lot that are entirely unique to the Schaffels. There's no other house in the Hilltop neighborhood that has 3 street frontages in a rear lot that abuts private open space like this in a manner that impacts their ability to construct a deck in a 15-foot setback. This is also, the other circumstance here is we're not abutting someone else's property line, right? We're not asking to encroach into someone else's property line where they may have a counter deck or trying to use and enjoy their property right on the other side of this deck. This is merely a setback from the open space which abuts the street, which speaks to the impact or the lack thereof to the other property owners. As I think I mentioned earlier, if you look to the north here across this private drive, that property owner right there on the corner has signed a letter of support. It's included in your packet tonight. We have and the other property owner that's directly adjacent to the west has also signed. Their view would be the view that I showed earlier that had kind of a tree blocking the deck. And another property owner, Jim Vanderhoff, wrote his letter and said, I have a clear diagonal view from my house and I love it. The last point I want to highlight on this site plan is that this site plan shows us and identifies that this is the only location on the lot where they can construct an elevated deck. If you look on the northeast or the east side, obviously the house is even closer to the property lines there. So there wouldn't be a way to feasibly construct an elevated deck. We talked about the western side. HOA said, no way. We want that to be the entrance into the hilltop area. So this is taking the natural jut in of the house and essentially squaring off the house, bringing in a few feet into the setback, but turning what is otherwise a very small deck for the community into a deck that is far more compatible and usable. Next slide, please. The architectural design, obviously, as Jennifer said, they worked with the architectural review committee, got their approval last November, which was a several-month process. They went back and forth on the iterations. The masonry wrapped pillars here are they are non-weight-bearing pillars, and they're sent to match the masonry of the rest of the house. These are all things that they went into great detail with the homeowners association. Right, but this shows that this is compatible with the character of the neighborhood. An HOA approval means it's compatible with the character of the community. They ensured that was, and it was an important process, and it was thorough. Next slide, please. This slide is included in our plans to speak even more to the unnecessary hardship of the usable space of this deck. As we talked about, Colorado living, part of our lifestyle is being outside, having the opportunity to entertain. A typical table that seats 6 to 8 people typically needs a platform of 12 feet by 12. The existing deck is only 8.5 feet from the property or from the sliding glass doors to the railing. So putting a table out there, you put 6 people around it, you can't back up your chairs. This is an unnecessary hardship. Next slide, please. These are a few more architectural designs, and next slide. These are the other decks. This is what we're used to seeing. This is what the Schaffels neighborhood, this is what their neighbors have. These are course consistent. One more. Next slide, please. Thanks. These are the other decks in the neighborhood. Some are bigger than the Schaffels proposed 554 square feet deck. Others are right in that area. But what we know is, as Jim Vanderhoff in his letter of support says, the Schaffels are the smallest deck in the neighborhood right now. So this is compatible. This is consistent with the character. We know that from seeing other decks. We know that through the HOA approval. We know that through our letters of support. Next slide, please. The lawyer slide. I know you all have been waiting for. I know. So here's where I bore you with all of the variance approval criteria and how we meet through all of them. I'll make my son. strict adherence to the 15-foot setback here creates practical difficulties and unnecessary hardship. There's limited utility with the existing deck. Without a variance, they can't expand their deck to increase the utility and outdoor living. That is what they desire to do through this variance. The property's unique physical conditions are that there are three street frontages. They abut private open space. It's not a setback from a street, it's a setback from a private open space area. These unique physical conditions, there's nowhere else on the property to put an elevated deck. And these are certainly unique to the Schaffel lot. This is the only home in Hilltop that has 3 street frontages that's on the corner that looks into the gate. This is unique to them. The property cannot reasonably develop. There is no other location for an elevated deck that's large enough to have the necessary utility. The Schaffels purchased this home in its existing condition. They didn't do this, and in fact, the original builder, we recognize that it's been a theme through the neighborhood that you expand your deck. The Schaffels are the only lot in the neighborhood that needed a variance in order to do so. And the proposed deck will not alter the character of the neighborhood, nor substantially impair the appropriate use or development. As we know, we have homeowners association approval. We have letters of support from those most directly impacted. And we have a really thoughtful design here that will add to the Hilltop neighborhood and the legacy-rich community. As Jennifer said, we have our architect here tonight. Jennifer and Jack are both with me. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have or find the right person to answer your questions. Thank you so much for your time. We respectfully request your support for our variance.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Okay, so are there any questions, comments from Planning Commission? Commissioner Dunn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Carlson, reading through the materials, I also noted that there is a elevation variance on the lot. Could you explain that briefly?
Absolutely. So the lot slopes from the southeast corner to the northwest corner. So on top of the elevated deck as it currently sits on the proposed deck, there's a walkout basement. The eastern side is higher. So if you were to put a deck on that side, it would tower, right? If you walked it out, this is the low point that walks straight out from the main living of the house. So that's the point. Is that clear enough? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Tomacek.
Okay. So you made a point that I was thinking of while I was looking at your plans, that your measurements are all for the private open space. Who owns and maintains that private open space?
The Hilltop Homeowners Association.
So in effect, the HOA has given their permission to sort of use that for additional distance as far as frontage goes.
Correct.
By its mere existence.
Correct.
A mere, and this may be more for the homeowner than yourself. How many of your neighbors have children, dogs, those kinds of things that actually use that open space as a public park?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's pretty limited. I mean, if you were walking by, you would have no idea that that is something other than somebody's backyard.
Yeah, we often have to take public open space or private open space
Right.
into account because it's meant to be used by the entirety of the group.
Right.
With a gated community and 15 homes, I don't see that being the same kind of thing that we see in other places.
Right.
And you also mentioned that if you were to measure from the deck to the street, you would still require a variance on the west side. How much of a variance would that be?
I don't know for sure. I think we're in the 1 to 2 foot range. I mean, it would be a different measurement, but it would be very.
That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of things. So you did mention, of course, the HOA Architectural Committee approval, and I know the challenges of getting through those, and my day job as an engineer. But and almost all neighbors were supporting but we have one neighbor that wrote a letter that was not supporting this at 11027, I believe, I think that was one that came in today. Yeah, 11027 Meadport. Where are they in relationship, and will this provide any sort of visual hardship for them?
Not from their house.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Excuse me. We do have a slide that shows an aerial with the addresses.
Oh, that would be fine.
So if we can pull up, it's a hidden slide. It's deed number 11 in the sequence. And you're getting a hidden slide. It's one that isn't. It's for this purpose.
Super secret slide.
What other hidden slides do you have back there?
We now have a new question for staff.
Come on, Patrick, share this slide.
I got it. Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, so if you travel on Main Court, you pass the Chapel's house first on the right. Then if you hang a right on that private road and you go down to one of it's not even the round cul-de-sac, it's kind of the dead end there in the middle. It's not the furthest north finger. But I believe the letter that we received this morning was that finger and on the north side.
So how many houses down?
It's the last house. They're actually,
The third house on the left?
the way the driveway works, they would get to their house by going around the back of their house and going to the end of the street. So they are next to the fence where Legacy Ridge Parkway is.
So it's the third house on the left, on that street that goes behind your house.
Their house would be on the left, going down.
The third one.
Right.
Yeah.
They would go round down behind their house to the right, and it's the last house on the left.
All right. I think we just wanted to make sure that we take their comment into consideration, make sure I understood where they are. I don't think I have anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Carpenter. Earlier, we were talking about the private open space and who maintains that, but is it the same company that maintains the private open space that maintains the lot of the applicant as far as mowing the grass?
It is.
Probably ought to have you run up to the microphone and there's, okay. All right, thank you.
It's important.
Okay. And I did have, prior to, Mr. Carlson, prior to your presentation, I did have questions about the deck sizes on the other houses, because what we had heard is that they didn't require a variance to build their decks. And I didn't have in the original packet what the dimensions of those decks were. My assumption was that they had replaced their decks, but they didn't require a variance because their setback on the back of their house was much more substantial than Shuffle's.
Exactly.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Mayo.
Did you say the architect was here?
Yes.
Is there a way to quantify what was mentioned before? That was the same question I was gonna have, is the setback from the street. Assuming that open space was part of their yard, since, I kind of buy into your theory that to the average person, it looks the same. But if it's encroaching on that too, that's kind of my question.
Yeah, so the distance, the existing house on the eastern side, that's 23.5 feet.
Right.
Is the measurement that we had. So if we're coming out about 4 feet 9 inches from that. Then if we take it over to the western side, so that distance to the street is about 17 feet on the eastern side. So it may be more in the range of 12 or 13 from the street. On the western side would be the greatest, or the shortest amount of space, just given that proximity. But I don't have those actual dimensions. I don't have any of that measured.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, the bottom line is if all of that grass area belonged to them, it's still encroaching.
Only on that western.
Okay.
Only on the western side and by likely less.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about the square footage of the deck, the existing versus the proposed. Do you have those numbers? You're probably here someplace. I told you.
229
Okay.
is the existing, and 554 is the proposed.
What percentage increase would you say that is?
Right. Maybe a lawyer do math.
Okay, yeah.
Well, we're gonna at least double it,
Like 60%.
and then a little bit more.
Yeah, so 60.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, looking around, I see no red lights other than my own. So at this point in time, I would like to open the public hearing portion of tonight's meeting. Whoever signed up, do we call their names, or we just come forward since there's like 12 of us?
The sheet for sign-ups has disappeared, so anybody in the audience. Oh, there it is.
Mystery solved.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Chuck, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna butcher your name.
Yeah, the last-
Go ahead.
The last name is Javernick, Chuck Javernick.
Okay.
Since we have the.
Yeah, so before we get too far into it, go ahead and state your full name and address for the record, please.
My name is Chuck Javernick. I reside with my wife at 11050 East Court. With the secret slide being up. Of all the neighbors in the neighborhood, my wife and I live directly across the street. So the front of our house, as we exit our garage, directly faces the back of Jennifer and Jack's house. And so, having not been an integral part of the architectural committee review, but obviously when you have 15 houses in a neighborhood, we all kind of know what's going on and that pretty much all the time. And so, yeah, my comments tonight to the commissioners is very, very brief, that we are perhaps most impacted by the expansion of their deck. And my wife and I both concur with the architectural committee's approval, and we have no objection that they put forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Nobody signed up online, correct? Okay, I believe this brings the public hearing portion of our testimony to closure. And there's no need for any staff. Staff have any comments here, rebuttal or otherwise?
Yeah, no comments at this time.
And the applicant has none either at this point in time. Okay, so at this point in time, I'd like to entertain a motion. Okay, now I need the red light.
Here we go.
Commissioner Dunn.
Mr. Chairman, I would hereby move to approve the the request for the variance for the minimum 15-foot rear setback requirement for residential dwellings in the Legacy Ridge Filing 9 official development plan. I disagree with staff in that I believe that the criteria were met for each one of the criteria that are required for approval in this, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, so Commissioner Dunn, before I ask for a second, we would need to hear on each of the 6 criteria why you believe that it.
Okay.
Greg, I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. If I may make a suggestion, I believe the applicant has provided its reasons for why the application meets all the criteria. So I think you could just cite to the applicant's presentation. That would be sufficient.
Just cite the application. Do we need slide number or anything?
Just the applicant's presentation this evening, all that is in the record.
Okay.
For each criteria. Just, in other words, met in accordance with the applicant's presentation.
Okay. Fair enough. What he said.
And then it's added. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Carpenter. Any final comments or questions from Planning Commission?
I would like to make a comment.
Commissioner Collin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Vice Chairman. I actually, looked at this application when it came in and I was reviewing it. I can't tell you how much I think this is the kind of thing when you take the time to really look at the architecture, work with the HOA, work with the utility company. I did think that it met the requirements because it is an unusual shaped lot. I'm really happy that this is moving forward. So I will be voting yes on this.
Commissioner Dunn.
Just for a little more clarity, Mr. Chairman, going through the 6 criteria, the main thing that I look at are especially number 3, number 4, and number 2. Those are the main ones because there are unique circumstances in this property. There's no denying it. Because of the size, the elevation, the layout, and the fact that this is the only property that I see in the area that is on 3 street frontages. So it's, they have the odds against them at the beginning. And of course, since the Schaffels didn't pre-order this home, then they can't be, of course, responsible for the things that went on before, the way the house is built, etc. So all these things were testified to, and I think as I read the record and as I listened to the testimony, I believe it's just overwhelmingly the kind of thing that we should put through.
Thank you, Commissioner Dunn. I wholeheartedly agree. Commissioner Mayor.
Yeah, the one comment I'd like to make is, it's clear that there's unique circumstances because of the law. And in my mind, the whole purpose of variance is to deal with something with unique circumstances. So in my mind, this one was a little bit easier than the last one because this one clearly has some unique circumstances. All your neighbors have big decks. You're the only one without a big deck because of the size of your lot. So I'll be voting yes as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, seeing no more questions, I'd like to go ahead and roll call vote. Jennifer, please.
Vice Chair O'Connell.
Yes.
Vice Chair O'Connell is in favor. Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter is in favor. Commissioner Collins.
Yes. Yes.
Commissioner Collins is in favor. Commissioner Dunn.
Yes.
Commissioner Dunn is in favor. Commissioner Tomachek.
Yes.
Commissioner Tomachek is in favor. Commissioner Mayo.
Yes.
Commissioner Mayo is in favor. Vote is complete.
Vote is complete and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, applicant. We appreciate your time and effort. She's happy. Do we have any old or other business to tend to? Meeting in 2 weeks?
Meeting in 2 weeks.
All right.
Say that now.
Okay, see you then. Oh, Commissioner McConnell.
One quick announcement. Remember recently when I announced that Andrew Spurgeon had left our organization?
Yes.
Never mind.
He's back.
We got Andrew back, and that's a good thing.
Wow.
So you'll be seeing more of him in the coming months and hopefully for a very long time.
Did he?
So the grass wasn't greener, huh?
Did he have to start back at the bottom again, or did you give?
No, actually, he just, the timeframe was small enough where he could just rescind his resignation. He's just picked up right where he left off, so we're really happy to have him back.
He doesn't have to start off mowing the lawn.
You know, I think that shows it doesn't take long to start missing us. Okay?
I agree.
Yeah. All right, thanks everyone. I want to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Have a good evening. Thanks again.